Well, hi there, Business 101 students. It is your instructor, Kent Tonkin, coming at you today to talk to you about Chapter 5. In Chapter 4, we were talking about the ways in which we could start companies. We can have partnerships or sole proprietorships or corporations. Today, we're going to be talking about what it actually takes to start your own business. If you want to be an entrepreneur, or if you want to just take over an existing business, how do you do it? What does it take? What are the skills required? What are the things you should be thinking about? That's what we're going to be talking about in Chapter 5. So let's jump in. If you want to be your own boss or own your own business, you might have that entrepreneurial spirit. So let's think about this. We're going to start off with some entrepreneurial trivia. These are people who made decisions to do big things with their lives and had great results because of it, but it wasn't always easy. So who are we talking about in these scenarios? Well, we have a TV star who started off literally by selling rebranded shirts on street corners. This guy found out that a lot of the bodyguards for rap stars were bigger fellas who could not get stylish clothing. So he decided he was going to make his own line of stylish clothing for these folks, and that's how he got started as an entrepreneur. He's a big TV star now. Can you guess who he is? Well, his name is Damon John, and he started off by building a company known as FUBU, which is an acronym for Us, By Us. How about this guy? He started his tech company out of his parents' garage, and he got the startup cash by selling a van. I'll give you a hint. You might be carrying a part of his innovation in your pocket right now because it's Steve Jobs. Then we get into this singer from Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't realize that this singer is from Pennsylvania. She grew up on a Christmas tree farm before she headed off to Nashville. Now one of the richest entertainers in the world. Of course, I'm talking about T. Swift. And what about this? How many of you, I guarantee that somebody who's watching this video right now is a fan of this author. She wrote a number of best-selling children's books, but before those hit big, she was almost homeless until she finally found her right big path to success. Who am I talking about? J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter books. And then we have a guy who got fired from his first newspaper job because he wasn't creative enough, and his first company went bankrupt. Who could it possibly be? Well, somebody who went on to become one of the biggest figures in animation of all time, of course, Mr. Walt Disney. And we have, what about coffee? I know I'm a big coffee drinker, as you can probably tell from my lectures. This particular gentleman was trying to start his own chain of coffee shops and got turned down literally 200 times before somebody would give him some startup cash. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Howard Schultz, the guy who started Starbucks. I love this story. Here's a guy who absolutely would not take no for an answer, and thank goodness he didn't. He kept on being told no. His business professor told him his business idea stunk, it wasn't practical. He gave him a C on the concept paper. Well, there's no better way to come back at an old prof than to get rich. So Fred Smith did just that by starting Federal Express. Again, his business teacher said there's no way you can do 24-hour shipping anywhere in the world. He showed him wrong. And how about this? The only African-American female in the Forbes 400 list of richest people. She came from next to nothing, and now she's worth over $3 billion. Of course, I'm talking about Oprah Winfrey. My point in showing you all this stuff is that the entrepreneurial spirit comes in different ways, shapes, and forms. Different people become different kinds of entrepreneurs, but they all have key traits. For example, they all are people who want to do big things in the world. They're all people who have ideas and vision, and they contribute to the U.S. economy. So we're going to be talking about all of these points in terms of why entrepreneurs are important for the U.S. economy and why you might want to be an entrepreneur, how you can get in and how you can get assistance, how you can take your ideas to reality and maybe even make some money along the way. So what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is somebody who decides, I have a great idea either for a new product or to make something better, and I want to own my own business. So they're people who can see things. They can read where the future is going ahead of everybody else, and they can prepare for it. So they're people who we refer to as visionaries. For example, and this is based on our text, I don't necessarily completely agree with our text on everything, but I like this idea. That basically somebody who owns a normal, quote-unquote, small business is a small business person, or somebody who owns a big business might be a big business person, but somebody who comes up with a new and creative idea is an entrepreneur. So somebody who owns a small community bookstore is a small business owner. Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon, is an entrepreneur. That being said, you could have a small business person who decides they're going to start a cat cafe bookstore, and that person might be an entrepreneur because it's an interesting or new idea. So what is the impact of small businesses? Bottom line is that most people who get their start in the United States in business probably get their start at a small business. A lot of the big ideas in the country come from small businesses. And again, a lot of the payroll comes out of small business. They're incubators for good ideas and ways that people can get into creative endeavors without sometimes even quitting their day jobs. So small business has a big economic impact. I won't read the stats to you, but the bottom line is that a lot of people start in small business. You have to ask yourself questions, however, if you are deciding you want to be a small business person or more directly an entrepreneur. Is there an idea that you have that will sell? Is there an opportunity? Do you have the know-how to get into the business you want to get into? Can somebody actually have access to the product that you're trying to build, or are other people building it already? Can you come in at a price that makes it worthwhile? What are the challenges? Do you have the skills to do so? These are all questions that you as a budding potential entrepreneur have to ask yourself. So we're also seeing now too that we're getting more people of color and people who identify as minorities and females who are getting involved in the world of entrepreneurship. I think that's a great thing because we as a country are becoming more diverse. Our entrepreneurial spirit should be represented across the board. So we have a number of different types of entrepreneurs. We've got classic, multipreneurs, and intrapreneurs. We're going to be talking very quickly about all of those. So what's a classic entrepreneur? A classic entrepreneur is somebody who says, I want to start my own company. I've got a cool idea. I'm going to go for it. Now, if somebody does that on a small scale, maybe while they're already working another job, we sometimes call them micropreneurs because they decide, well, I just want to do something small to add to my bottom line or to create a new idea that I have while I'm still keeping my job or working part-time or whatever. Those are micropreneurs, but they're still a type of classic entrepreneur. Then we get to multipreneurs. And I think of people like Elon Musk, for example, or Jeff Bezos, people who can't seem to stop starting businesses, people who have all these great ideas. And if we look at a lot of the folks who are big idea people, Damon John's one of those people. He started multiple companies. Most people who have one big idea tend to have other big ideas and they turn it into multipreneurs. Then we have intrapreneurs. We're talking about people who are working for another company and creating for that company. So the best example off the top of my head I can think of is the Post-it note invented by our pal Spencer Silver over at 3M. If you remember the story of the Post-it note, he was trying to develop an adhesive essentially that would be a super stick adhesive, but in reality, it didn't work very well. Worked pretty well, though, for keeping pieces of paper temporarily stuck to surfaces, and all of a sudden, we had the Post-it note as we know and love today. I consider myself an intrapreneur. I get to create new courses, and I get to create new ideas all while working for St. Francis. So an intrapreneur is somebody who gets to create things while working for somebody else. The advantages are, if you get to do this, well, you don't have to worry about your pay and your benefits and having stable income. The disadvantages are the financial rewards sometimes aren't as great. For example, if I developed a new patent at St. Francis University while I was on their payroll, technically the university would own the patent. I'm not making big bucks from it. It's a trade-off. I like the security. Some people, for example, who have a bigger entrepreneurial spirit than me may not want to work for somebody else. I just put this picture up of Spencer Silver. I think it's pretty awesome that we could take a failed adhesive and turn it into one of the biggest products of the 20th century. So, guys, we're talking about different types of entrepreneurs. Let's get into what motivates people. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be somebody who is kind of headstrong, who is independent, who can think for themselves, who's willing to put in long nights and maybe even some uncertain times. If you can be a risk taker, if you've got a great idea, if you've got passion and energy, because a lot of the time there's going to be a lot of early mornings, late nights, and not a lot of pay till you get started. And entrepreneurs have to be people who are going to commit to the long game because success hardly ever happens overnight. The other part of it too, people who are entrepreneurs, if you got a great technology idea, for example, a lot of people who are technology minded really don't know how to market or relate their product to other people. Sometimes they're very kind of granular and technically minded. Sometimes people who are managers, however, aren't good at technology. So if you're a manager type who's got a great idea, you're probably going to need a technology partner. If you're a technology person, for example, and you might not be relationship minded, you might need a managerial type to help you get the word out about your product. One of the best examples I can think of, if you've ever heard of the Impossible Burger, the guy who's behind Impossible Foods is a scientist and MD. He admits he's not good at talking to money people, so he surrounds himself with other folks who can help him deal with the business end so he can deal with the science end. So again, people who are entrepreneurs don't always need to be reassured. We also get into the idea of what is a small business. Our text has a rule of thumb that it's less than 500 people, it's a small business. The general rule of thumb, if you got more than one person or under 50, that's definitely small. Our text says 500. If you said that small business is anything under 500 people, I could roll with that. But some businesses are really small. In fact, if we saw in the previous chapter, a lot of sole proprietorships, for example, power the U.S. economy as well. Just because you're small doesn't mean you're not mighty. If we look at some of the inventions that have come from small business over the year, we've got the Wright brothers, a couple of bicycle makers, a Kitty Hawk, flying the first actual airplane. And we got Steve Jobs making an Apple computer in a wooden console in his parents' garage. And the Stratocaster, the brainchild of Leo Fender, the first mass production electric guitar, solid body electric guitar, I should say, all came from small workshops and small businesses. People who had big ideas. And we're getting a lot of increase over the past few years with people wanting to be entrepreneurs. It runs across the gamut in terms of people who are younger, who have great ideas, who have that entrepreneurial spirit. We see a lot of that with millennials and Gen Z. We also see a lot in retired people. In fact, the highest rate of entrepreneurship is in people over the age of 60. Why? Because they've retired, they've got income, and they've got free time. So why not start a business? So in terms of number of employees by percentage by established small business, in terms of small businesses, about half of all small businesses in the United States have 53, half of all businesses in the United States have 1 to 4 employees, I should say. I got tongue-tied there for a minute. And this is going under the idea of small businesses being like 1 to 50 people. But again, some folks say up to 500. Our text definition is going for the number of 50 in this regard. So over half of small businesses by that designation, being businesses under 50 people, have 1 to 4 employees. So there's a lot of super small businesses out there. So how do you start a business? Well, the first part of it is finding an idea. The second part is choosing how you want to set up. Do you want to be a partnership? Do you want to be a sole proprietorship or a corporation? Then we have to develop our business plan, which we'll talk about. It's how you make money. You got to find a way to grow your company. You got to finance it somehow. And an alternative path to all these things is maybe buying an established business. Sometimes your idea comes from what you're already doing for a living. For example, I teach for a living. So if I wanted to do consulting, some of my consulting ideas would probably come from what I do for my day job. You could come up with an idea for your day job, from your day job, and get this, you might even be able to get your employer, if they like your new idea, to finance it. It happens all the time. We see a lot of ideas coming out of universities as well. So your former boss might be your future investor. What does that say to us? Never burn bridges when you're on your way out. So you have to know, for example, when you're looking at this great idea, however, what are things that you're good at? Why are you starting this business? Do you have a niche? Is there a place for you? And also, how do you make sure that there's financial solvency? What you need is a business plan, for example. How do you want to set up your business is up to you. Do you want to be a sole proprietorship, or do you want to be a corporation, or do you want to be a partnership? The good news is you can always start one way and change later, meaning you can grow your business. You can start small and move on up. Your business plan, however, is very important. What we're talking about for a business plan is how does your company actually make money? Why is that so important in the modern economy? Well, because there's a whole lot of companies out there that are operating but not making money, or not making a profit, I should say. Uber is a great example. Uber has a lot of revenue, but they don't have profit at this point. They're still not profitable because they're still investing in the business. So you want to look at how soon you can be profitable. If you've got big investors who are willing to give you patience while you work out your business model, that's one thing. If you're a sole proprietor, you've got to figure out a way to be able to make money and retain your business and be in the black pretty quickly. So what are the elements of a business plan? You got to have your executive summary, which means you're telling somebody, for example, in 30 seconds or less what your company is all about. Your vision and mission statement, some people view those as interchangeable. Your mission statement basically says what your company is all about. That's the one I really care about you knowing about. Vision is sometimes your philosophy, but your mission is why your company exists in the first place. Your company overview. What does your company do and how does it work? Your product or service plan. What specifically do you make or what services do you provide? How do you market that stuff? Are you going to use social media? Are you going to use targeted advertising? Management plan. How do you manage the different parts of your operation? How many supervisors do you need? Your operating plan. What about supply chain management? How do you pull supplies in and turn them into finished goods? Your financial plan. How much profit is built into each product that you make? And finally, an appendix of supporting documents would mean you'd have, for example, spreadsheets about your finances or maybe inventory sheets. These are all key elements of a business plan. Once you have all these ideas, you got to pay for this somehow. So how do people pay for a startup company? Well, some people hit up their friends and family. Jeff Bezos sure did. He started Amazon with loans from his family, where you could go to the bank for traditional financing. Let me tell you, it's not always easy. Particularly when we're in or coming out of a recession, banks want to make sure that you've got a really good business plan before they're going to lend you money. Then you can get into equity. What that means, you're giving somebody part of your company in exchange for some cash. Anytime on Shark Tank that we have somebody who's willing to invest in somebody else's company, but they want a stake in it, that means they own part of the company. And equity is something that is sought by venture capitalists. So venture capitalists are the people who seek equity in your company. Equity also can be selling stock. So, for example, if you sell stock in your company, as we talked about in Chapter 16, you're actually giving people equity in your company. That's equity financing as well. Then we have angel investors, who are people who might give you money to invest in the company with a low interest payback or even no interest payback if they really like it. And then we get into crowdfunding. Crowdfunding means basically it's a form of equity investing. You're getting something back out of the company you're investing in. Let me give you an example. Anybody who's ever seen my office at St. Francis knows that I have more action figures than the average 8-year-old kid. That being said, there was a property from the 90s. It was a comic book. And the comic book was something that people my age absolutely loved. Well, the creator came back and wanted to be able to produce action figures from this old comic book from the 90s. And so I was able to order an action figure from the guy who used to make the comic book. I paid for it in advance, and about a year later, it showed up on my doorstep. So I was able to contribute to his crowdfunding event in a form of equity financing. I essentially became an investor in the company. Some folks would argue that I was an angel investor because once I got my action figure, I had no further control over the company. I had purchased something in advance and I'd given him money to be able to grow his company. And that's what crowdfunding is all about. So again, it's one of these things, if you can find the right person who wants to invest in your company simply because they love it, great. Oftentimes there's strings attached. Well, in addition, one of the ways that people often decide to get into business is by buying an established business. And that can be great. If you're a family business, for example, it can be low or high risk. What do I mean by that? If you're a mom who's owned a successful business and you're selling it to your son or giving it to your son, that's great. Well, if you're buying a business from somebody, though, you might also be asking yourself, why are they getting out of the business? People dump used cars when they become maintenance problems, and they often do the same thing with businesses. So the buyer must beware. Keep that in mind. So why do businesses fail in the first place? And I apologize, we got a little bit of cutoff on the bottom slide here, but I'll cover it. About half of all businesses fail in the first 5 years. Why? Well, the biggest reason, as I've mentioned in class before, the biggest reason for business failure is improper bookkeeping of taxes, not paying your taxes, getting into trouble with the IRS, and owing a bunch of back taxes. But you also can get into what we refer to as economic factors, such as business downturns. Wow, nobody is buying tablets anymore because our smartphones are getting so big. So if you're a tablet company competing with the iPad, maybe you're going out. Or the interest rates go up, so it's tougher to borrow money. It could be financial causes, which means you simply have not enough capital. You didn't put enough money back. You had too many expenses, not enough profit. Could be lack of experience. You tried, but you just didn't have the right skills to make the business go. Or you could have personal reasons. You decide that you just want to get out of this. You want to be done with the business. You want to go away or move on to other opportunities. Those things can happen too. So all of that being said, if you are in business, if you want to stay in business, sometimes you got to pivot. So we talked a little bit in one of the previous chapters about ghost restaurants, restaurants with no front end on them, for example. Well, that's a pivot that a lot of restaurants did during the pandemic. So sometimes you got to change. Sometimes you need to pull in consultants. If you're hiring a single consultant for your company and you're not an accountant, make it your accountant. Stay out of tax trouble. Hire people who can come in and help you make your business better. Or you might need to hire full-time staff. Businesses often fail for being fearful of expanding. As a result, they can't fit or fill the needs that they have, and people get tired of waiting for products or services and they move on. We've got a small business administration which is funded by your tax dollars. It's essentially a government agency whose entire purpose it is to help people grow their small business. We have a small business development center, an SBDC, right on campus. If you got an idea for a business, they'll help you grow it. Talking to a retired executive or a business person, almost all of these men and women would love to help you grow your new business. Look at an emerging market. There's a lot of people who own small businesses in the United States who are exporting to other countries. And why not start where you're in school? We have an investment club here at St. Francis that manages real money, honest to God money in the stock markets. We've got an Actors Club to give you experience dealing with business and getting experience and more. Get the experience while you're in school on somebody else's dime, or do an internship. Folks, this was a very, very quick summary on how entrepreneurship works. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great day.